always said, if I'm not having fun, I'm not going to do it. And I don't think the games were always fun, but it was everything around it that I wasn't having fun with.
The council is now in session.
With a personality shaped by being an athlete and a background in mainstream sports media, I found that the stories I was most interested in telling were the ones often overlooked, the ones that might not otherwise be told, the ones that show the intangible and not just the highlight reel. The Sports Council is about highlighting the great, the good, the unique, and everything in between in the Pacific Northwest sports world. I'm Jamie Council. Thanks for joining me.
You're listening to the Sports Council on 1340 ESPN, the Tri-Cities leader in sports.
Craig West, broadcaster, started in 1976.
And you are best known for being the voice of the Tri-City Americans. You've been here quite a while, but walk us through what happened before. Like I said, everybody knows you here from your time in the Tri-Cities.
Yeah, my mom passed away in 1981 from cancer, July of 81, and she was probably the best one to lay out exactly who I was. Said, you know, Craig gets from point A to B, but all the stuff that he does, he might go to Z, and then he goes over to R and Q, but eventually it ends up A to B, and I think that's kind of what I did. So the first job I had came out of the broadcasting workshop, which was an interesting story in itself. KISS Broadcasting Workshop was on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood in the Playboy building, back in the height of Playboy. So it's 1975. You could ride the elevator with Barbie Benton. And one of the promoters, in fact, I ended up getting in. It was a student teacher I had in art in high school at Monroe High School, and I just wrote her all the time because she'd misspell stuff, and Miss Rice was her name. Get in the elevator, and she's in the elevator. And I see she's going up to the top floor to the record to, use up there at the top floor and working. And she's staring at me. She's staring and staring at me. I'm 20 years old at the time. And as she goes to get out, I go, glad to see you got out of teaching. I knew you. I knew you. That was back in the heyday, and I was going into, I wanted to be a country DJ, and the reason I picked country was not because I really like country music, it was because you could be older, and I was looking at it for a career. But I also wanted to do sports and play-by-play, so I would, do various events, and, I would go down to see the San Diego Mariners and the old World Hockey Association, and I'd take my tape recorder, and nobody'd know me down there. I wouldn't look like an idiot going to the Kings game, and I could do the game and, broadcast, and people around go, you're pretty good. So it was interesting. And, eventually got my first job. And my first job came about in Grand Coulee, Washington, doing Lake Roosevelt Raiders. They hadn't made the playoffs in 20 years, and they made the playoffs when I got there. So I always joked that I was a good luck charm. So I said, well, Mom, she'd be pretty proud. Yeah, hey, A to B, but he had all these stops along the way. And I was 26 when she passed away. It was pretty hard, losing your mom that early, and she was only 61 years old. But she knew her little boy pretty well.
And let's talk a little bit about the Tri-City Americans. You're back with them this year. Just talk about how this year is going.
Well, I think we can kind of start. I've had more fun with people coming up to me, and in full disclosure, you knew what was going to happen. And I've known since the summer, Bob Torrey and I, that it was going to work this way. And all these people coming up to me, well, how are you enjoying your retirement? I said, I never said I retired. I said I was going to do some different things, which exactly I have. And I've been able to take care of myself. I've lost 25 pounds, all that COVID weight. I've just about got it all, another 10, and I'll have it knocked off. But take more care of myself. Blood pressure's good. It's been nice and take the stress away. I had an awful lot of stress. And I don't think last year I always said, if I'm not having fun, I'm not going to do it. And I don't think, the games were always fun, but it was everything around it that I wasn't having fun with. And I think everybody noticed it. And I know I did. But I think everybody else around me knew it, because I was more within myself. Withdrawn is probably a better word, and I don't like to be that way. I'd rather be more gregarious and outgoing, and I think I've kind of returned back to that. But I stayed in the background when they made the announcement with the radio, and just kind of stood in the background, let everybody else talk, and it was like, oh, Craig's going to do this. Well, it could be all season, it could be 2 more games, I don't know. So I'm just kind of the placeholder right now, and I enjoy it, and I'll help the next guy be a success. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, and you kind of got to my next question is, a lot of people, like you said, Craig's retired, and you were the first one to tell me I never use the R word. And it's kind of tough because, like you said, you kind of know when to step away, even though it's not always the easiest, and you've had a long career that you've been in certain situations similar before where it's time to step away.
Yeah, a good example, I worked with the late Bud Foster, who was the voice of the Cal Bears, the first voice of the San Francisco 49ers for their first 13 years. He's in their Hall of Fame. Worked with Bud in Redding, California. He was my morning partner. We had a 33 share in ratings. So 1 out of 3 radios were listening to Craig and Bud. And it was a great experience. But working with him, I got to do some sports. And he did the first game. He said, I can't see anymore. And Bud, the funny thing is, he's my age. And he said, you take it over. And it was dynamite. And then he had all these stories that he could tell from his days of the Cal Bears, basketball and football and titles and Joe Cap. And, one day he brought Joe in and put him on the air. It was hilarious. One of the funniest things ever. And, older football fans will remember Joe. He was a delight. He was one of those guys that would call signals, and he would pick a guy on the other side, and then, you number 46, and everybody be laughing, and then they'd run the play, He was a real character, absolute character, and did some acting too. He was a very good actor, and got the star with Angie Dickinson in NBC in the 70s on Police Story. So he was a good actor too, much less a coach.
And that's something that I really consider you a mentor. On my Facebook today, it popped up that 2 years ago we were doing a Kamayakan football game together, and just how many people that you've interacted with in your career, and why are those relationships so important to you?
Well, I look at it, and you can't put any of that in the bank, and I've never been a materialistic person. I mean, you can look around here. I'm just not materialistic. I'm not a person that has $2,000 suits. I'm not sure I have a $200 one. It's just I'm not that kind of person. Nothing flashy, and I've enjoyed the experiences and people that I've got to meet, to work along with. I look back and, I'm not sure I probably enjoyed Joe Madden winning with the Chicago Cubs, not because it was the Cubs. I spent 4 years with him with the Angels, working in Palm Springs from 87 to 90, and was one of the most delightful people. Got to ride with him. He was a roving instructor. Drove from Stockton to Reno, took a 4 or 5 hour drive, talked the whole way. I mean, these are all things that you can't replace. So when the Cubs won, I was happy. My aunt had passed away in 2009. She was 99. The Cubs never won during her life. And Lucille was born in 1909, and they won in 1908. So they waited to win 7 years after she passed away. So it was ironic in itself, but it was fun to watch because she'd watch every Cub game, and she loved Carey. It was very much so. And in fact, I got to talk to Harry on the phone. He when he had his stroke back in the 80s, he was living in Palm Springs. I was calling the long season A team, which is now here in the Tri-Cities. and the Palm Springs Angels, and he was listening to the games, and he called Scott Kiner, Ralph's son, was our general manager, and said, "You got a really good guy working there." So that was where I kind of started getting a move into sports. Started doing some sales on the side. I was still a morning guy. And Kiner knew it was like, this guy's not here to become, Howard Stern. He doesn't want to do that.
One part you just mentioned, a lot of people kind of helped you get to where you are, and I've seen that. Like, you pay it forward earlier. You said that whoever does, come after you as the voice of the Tri-City Americans, you're going to help be as successful as possible. And I feel like that's something that is not a lot of people see in this profession, is that we're really based upon those that come before us that help us get there.
Well, I've always looked at it, Jamie, you're always auditioning every day for your next position. And whether you're a player, because you're not going to be there forever. Eventually everybody gets told, using a line out of Moneyball from Billy Bean. But everybody gets told when it's time. And either you see the writing on the wall or they write it for you. And I've tried to stay in that situation, but I also realize, going back, when I met Bobby Brett back in 1988, and then he ends up buying the Spokane Chiefs in 1990, I'm reading the Riverside Press Enterprise one Sunday afternoon, and I see they bought the Spokane Chiefs. Well, I lived in Portland and worked in radio, went to every Winterhawk game for 9 years. And I go, well, maybe they want somebody to do baseball and they can do hockey. Well, I'd called one hockey game, a high school game. Are they willing to take a chance on me? So our general manager, Carol Nelson, gave to his general manager of the High Desert Mavericks. Leanne got it to Bobby, and the first thing Bobby heard it, they listened to it, he and the late Tom Leip. This guy sounds like Vin Scully. We want this guy. And says, if he sucks at hockey, we can keep him for baseball. So I got hired, and that was how it came about. But all the scouts, back in those days, there was no internet from 90 to 98. It finally came in 95, but it was so infantile. And that's how people followed the league. So you could listen, you could pick it up in Manitoba, you could pick it up in Saskatchewan, you could pick it up in Alberta. In Edmonton it was like a local station. Prince George was like a local station. So Don Akbar and I became friends when he was in Seattle because his dad liked me and listened in Prince George when they'd play the T-Birds. So, and he'd talk about it, and he said, my dad likes you, I like you too. So Walter liked me, so I was in good shape, eventually, and he came here. But where I was auditioning was they could hear it in Vancouver, BC, and I never knew Ron Toigo when he owned the team here. But he would listen to every game, and as soon as he found out I was available, that I was leaving Spokane in 98, I'd made the decision at the end of the baseball season I wasn't coming back. Didn't feel I'd gone as far. There's nothing wrong. I'd gone as far as I could go there. And before I became bitter, I got to do something else. So I had made the decision. It was 5 days. Bob Brown was the general manager of the Americans, and he'd been in Kamloops, and we got along real well, whatever. And he leaves a message at my house, and it was kind of a panic message. Whatever you do, don't do anything. Please call me. And I was like, okay. So I make the call. Bob, how are you? It's Craig, whatever. We want to hire you. How much do you want? And I was like, what? So there was a few things that kind of went into it that I said, well, I want to talk to Mr. Toigo first. I said, there's some things I'd like to see changed. That's why we want to hire you. And I knew Darrell Hay was here. I said, so are you hiring Don Hay? He said, I can't tell you that. I said, you're hiring Don Hay. I said, I won't be telling anybody. Don't worry about it. So he sets up. I was going to fly up to Vancouver. It turns out Ron had to leave on business. And we end up with a 2-hour and 15-minute phone call. And, we just hit it right off. I mean, he was great. I worked for him twice. Worked for him in Vancouver and worked for him here. And really a great guy. Just, they treated me extremely well. And That's how I ended up here. Him listening to the games in Vancouver when they played the Americans. You're auditioning for that next job when you're working today. It's no different. Next game I do, somebody could hear it and change your life. Is it the right person? You never know. But I've had a few of those where it was the right person who heard it.
And not many people know this. You know, you still working, still like you don't act your age in a good way, but you also still get on the ice. And I've been to a few of your games. Not that many people know that about you.
Yeah, you know what? I love to play. And I'm really a big kid, and I like to get out, play goal. And I've got a group of guys I've played with for the last 10 years in Spokane, and Jeff Mayer is a great friend. He was our stick boy. He was in high school when I started with the Spokane Chiefs in 1990-91, and they won the Memorial Cup. And he runs the team, and I'm playing with this kid that's 26, and he's turning 51, and you know, I mean, here we are, you know, and we're still playing together. It's just, it's funny. And there's guys that I'm playing with that I played with their fathers, and their fathers don't play anymore. And then their dads come because they're amazed I'm playing with their sons. I was the Chiefs practice goalie, you know, for 8 years. So I get calls from Brian Maxwell and from Mike Babcock. Hey, you're in today. We need Dominic Hasek today, was what Babs would call me. Hasek.
Well, I think that's really good in breaking down that barrier between you and players. And it's almost sometimes in media, there's that wall between you and the people you're covering rather than being seen on the same team. And I think you having that background and that relationship with them really helps break down that barrier of them knowing, you know, you broadcast, but you're just a big kid yourself.
I think, in fact, I know because a lot of the guys still keep in touch with me from my time in Spokane from 90 to 98, and they respected the fact that I was on the ice with them. Never tried to be them, but I competed hard, and I never, ever let up. And if I gave up a goal, I wasn't happy. And I made some of the guys look bad. Some of them I made look good, kind of depended. But the thing it gave me is I learned what their tendencies were, and it helped me on the air. I knew, but it wasn't like I give up tips of, hey, he labels this, or, you know, I didn't do any of that. But it made me, I felt, a better broadcaster, knowing what every one of our players did and what they could bring to the team. And they all respected that. And, you know, Mike Babcock, unfortunately, it didn't work for him in Columbus. The telephone thing, I'm still trying to figure that one out myself, but I'm not going to try and analyze a guy with a psychology degree. I just don't understand that. But he had me figured pretty well. And he goes, you know, you have that fear of failure. And I said, exactly. And so I know you're going to compete every time you come out there. It may not be perfect, but you're going to push because you don't like to lose and you don't want to fail. And he had me pegged pretty much. I'm not a good loser. From when I was a little kid, even to today, I'm not a good loser.
Well, not being a good loser, that's always a good thing to put on your resume. And speaking of your resume, now you don't know if you'll be here for 2 more games with the Americans or the whole season.
Could be the whole year. Yeah.
That's kind of a tough place to be.
I don't know if it's exactly like knowing you've got a certain amount of time to live, and so you appreciate everything. Probably not the best example because I had to go through that with my mom and dad, but there's probably a little bit where you see some finality and you're okay. You want to savor every day, and I'm just having fun. So it'd be like, you know, I may never do this again. So this might be the last one. So let's have a lot of fun with it. And I know I had a lot of fun on Saturday night. Cameron Hughes was at the game. He does every Vegas Golden Knight game. He had the crowd activated. He's been here before. But he comes in like he's just a fan. Oh, there's some fan. This wasn't exactly a cheerleader. This is a big league guy. He does NBA. It's, you know, he's a big time show. Big time show. So you had a celebrity in your midst on Saturday night.
I hear you guys had a good crowd. I was at Central Washington for their football game, but I was talking to Jeff Morrow. He was at the game, and it sounded like you guys had biggest crowd that they've seen in a while.
Yeah, for an opening night, it's tough, especially you're going against the Cougars are playing. They're at home. This is the number 2 drawing area. And good opponent, too. What was it, UCLA? So tight game with them. UCLA won, but hey, a lot of fans go to those games. A lot of fans here. So I'm sure some of them raced to get back, but we didn't do them any favors. We start at 6 o'clock now, which I think was great. And you and I, the first year they did it at 6 was when we had 250 people in the COVID year. And then when we came back, we went at 6, and you notice the crowds got younger. And it was one of the things baseball has started to do that, where they start earlier. And I noticed it with my grandkids, who are now going to be 17 and 14. But when they were smaller, they'd come to Saturday games, start at 7:05, but by 8:30 they're tired. They're starting to fall asleep. As wired as they would be. Well, if you start at 6, then they can go to bed at 8:30, right? And I think we're seeing a younger crowd that has come in, and I think the staff has done a really good job of kind of changing the environment. Not that we don't want older fans like me, but your bread and butter and your future are the younger fans. Those are the ones that become fans, that bring their kids, and you look at it long term, and I think they've done a tremendous job doing that.
And I like that it's kind of like, that your days are numbered, so it makes you appreciate it a lot more. I just watched a movie where, it's kind of sad and morbid, but the woman knew she was dying, so she had a funeral while she was still alive, because it's kind of like, I want people to say nice things about me when I'm alive. And I feel like it's kind of the same thing, where now the amount of people that are reaching out to you because they know that your games are finite here, that has to be kind of nice to see the impact you've made on the fan base.
The story that came out, and it was July 3rd in the Herald, and I never expected to be on the front page, and I was in Wells, Nevada on my way down to Vegas for a week. And I was going down to stream hockey, was what I was going to do, play-by-play, and do it for one of our scouts, Dino Caputo, that runs a tournament down there. And Zoran Razic, who is the president of the Silver Tips, his kids were playing in it. So, it was a fun week. Golden Knights were down there. They were having their rookie camp. So it was a fun time for me. But I get a text first thing in the morning when I'm getting up from Bob Torrey, you better buy some papers. I go, why? They're on the front of the paper. Oh, okay. So I looked for the story online, and as I went online, it was like all these people. I gave him some numbers. Hey, this guy'd be good. This guy'd be good. This person would be good to talk to. And he got a hold of not everybody. And the one that I really was touched by was probably Scott Kiner coming in. And he described the time there in Palm Springs, which was the pivotal time where I made the career change. And really said some really kind things, and he helped me a lot. There were days we fought, and that's a good program director and a good general manager, but he was stunned. And here's something that no one knew. The first season I was in Spokane, I was going broke. And the next year I had to file BK because I'd run out of money. And, win the championship and you run out of money. And so I had some real tough decisions I had to make as I went through that entire situation. And, it kind of tells you what's significant. But Scott, 3 times during that season, called up, and the baseball team wanted to be back too. The Angels, they ended up moving in 92, and they're in Lake Elsinore now. They've been there ever since, owned by the Stickney family. And they offered every call was $1,000 a month more every time. Now, this is another $3,000 that I could have grabbed and gone back. And it was very tempting, that last one, because I know I'm going down the toilet and the big flush sound is coming, and it's like I got nowhere to go but down. And I stayed with it. I said I'm on the right track, but I did this for Aaron and Nolan, and they were little at the time. They were 8 and 5. Our mom and I had split in '88, and she went back to Portland, where she was from. And I wanted to be near them. I wanted to be a dad. That was the number one thing. So I said, I got to stick with this. And Morris Bergreen was the owner. He was from New York, and he bought the station in 1960, KCMJ. So he'd have a station to listen to when he came to town. It's nice to be rich, right? So he said, and it touched me when I talked to him. He said, you're the most intelligent guy we've had here. I don't ever want to lose you. And they ended up losing me. It was like, oh. I could have, eventually, I wasn't going to be there. There was a finality, and I saw it in 1990 that the business was changing. It was automating, and 1998, and here's your replacement. Here comes the computer. There's no, you walk into a station, instead of having 5 stations and people are on the air, and there's a computer in there. There's no one there. So the business, I could see it was changing, and it was like, I don't want to go back to it. So it was one of those, you trip over a dollar to pick up a dime, you got to be careful. But this was a lot of dollars that I could have picked up immediately, and problem solved. But it would have created more problems with Aaron and Nolan, and it was more important to be a dad. And today, 41 and turning 39, so I didn't make a bad choice.
You wouldn't have ended up in the Tri-Cities. Your life would have been vastly different.
Well, I used to, when I would drive to go get Aaron and Nolan, we'd play in Portland, and Spokane to their house was 360 miles in Tigard. And I'd always fill up in the Tri-Cities, and I go, why am I not here? Eventually, after 8 years of that, having Ron Toigo in a discussion, which brings another Toigo story up, and I didn't tell you this, that when I had that 2-hour and 15-minute phone call, 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from Sultan, who was his finance manager. Well, this is Sultan from Shadow Holdings, yes. Mr. West, how are you today? Good. Who did you talk to with our organization for 2 hours and 15 minutes? Oh, I was on with Ron Toigo called me. Oh, that's perfect. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you. So he was going through, wanted to know, probably was going to fire whoever made that 2-hour and 15-minute phone call. Today it's nothing. You do it, it's free, right? Back then it was probably a $200 phone call going across the border. And who made this phone call? So I learned real fast. Hey, don't piss off the Sultan. Don't do that.
It's kind of like as when I first got a cell phone, you only had a limited amount of text messages, and then it was free calling after 9. So if you needed to call, it had to be after 9. Otherwise, your parents would yell at you for driving up the phone bill. And I think I asked you this earlier, but I'm going to ask it again. Just because my own personal experience, I consider you a big mentor, and I think you've also helped me the most in my broadcasting. I think there was one game we were doing a Tri-City Americans game together, and you're like, Jamie, this is your crutch word. I want you to write this down on the paper and mark how many times you say it. And I think it only took me about 2 games to break that, and nobody had said that to me. And that's one thing that's hard, is you know that you need to get better, especially when you're first starting out, but you don't always know what that is. And not that many people go out of their way to make somebody better, and you do. And that meant a lot to me. And it just says a lot about who you are. And like I said, you are one of my biggest mentors.
I think the biggest thing that's happened in broadcasting, especially with play-by-play, is it intimidates management, and they're not like they used to be, where you had really a director of broadcast that told people, you need to work on this, you need to do this. And they just kind of let them do their own thing instead of, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. Let's go over this. And I'm fortunate I had that, and some of the meetings are great. Some of them I wanted to run over them with my car. But you needed to hear, and you look back all these years later and go, I could have taken that a little bit better.
And in the place that you're sitting now, this is the last question, knowing that every game, you never really know when it's going to be up. What message do you have to Tri-Cities? You spend a lot of time here and given a lot of yourself to the Tri-City Americans and its fan base.
Well, probably I'll be really honest right now. When I came here and I did the contract, it was for 2 years. It was to get my kids my daughter out of high school and my son out of middle school. And then I was going to, really didn't plan on staying. And then as it went by, I planned on staying, and then I wanted to leave, and then it was like, you know what? I'm going to stay. And then friends of mine from California would come here, and they'd look at the rolling hills with no trees and all that. Hey, it's kind of like Palm Springs. And it was the closest thing I could find to Palm Springs. And living on a golf course, I'm a horrible, horrible golfer. Walk out on the first green at Meadow Springs. But I love golf courses. I covered the PGA, did that for networks. That was one of the experiences. I got to deal with LPGA and PGA golfers and do interviews, go live on CBS, which John Rooney, I remember John gave me it was really fun. I was giving him a golf report from the Dinah Shore, and he got hired. He said, I got hired to do the Minnesota Twins, and he was doing baseball. And now today, he's still working in the major leagues, and he's with the St. Louis Cardinals. But he said, first person, he said, I just got hired, Minnesota Twins. I said, John, congratulations. He said, I know you do baseball. I'm just so excited. I said, and so I followed him ever since. So his slogan is, it's a goner. So I guess that's kind of what I'd say. Eventually, I'm going to be a goner. I just don't know when. I don't think there's any great plan. But if I end up leaving, I couldn't thank the people here enough for the kindness and for their friendship, whether it's playing hockey or, fans at the game or just anybody in town. It's a very friendly area, very welcoming area. I didn't intend to stay that long, but it's the longest I've lived anywhere.